If you have ever stepped into a forest at night, even for a moment, you have already crossed a boundary. Not a marked trailhead, not a wooden sign with distances and warnings, but a thin and ancient threshold that separates the world you know from a world that has been waiting far longer than you have been alive. Most people think the woods are empty after dark, a stretch of silence and shadows, a place where the only things awake are owls, insects, and whatever your imagination invents when the path disappears behind you. But the truth is simpler and much worse. The forest is never empty. It watches, it listens, it remembers the shape of your footsteps long after you have forgotten the way home. There are trails that only exist under moonlight, paths that shift when you blink, clearings that breathe a little too slowly when you step inside them. There are voices that sound familiar, too familiar, calling your name from just beyond the tree line, echoing back with perfect timing, as if the woods were practicing you before deciding what to do next. Some things in nature do not want to be found, others want to be followed, and a few of them want to follow you back. Tonight, these are not stories about monsters in the dark. They are stories about the dark itself, about what waits in the silence when the forest decides you have gone far enough, or when it decides you should never have come at all. Get comfortable, turn off the lights, and if you hear a voice outside your window that sounds almost like your own, do not answer it. Not tonight. These are 5 haunted forest horror stories. Story 1. The trail that only appears after midnight. I booked the cabin because my therapist said I needed a break from screens. That was her actual phrase. Your nervous system is cooked, Daniel. No more doom scrolling in bed. Go somewhere with bad Wi-Fi, touch grass, let your brain remember what silence feels like. So I found a rental online that bragged about exactly that. A digital detox cabin tucked into a stretch of state forest about 3 hours from the city. The listing photos showed a steep gravel driveway, a dark green A-frame, a wraparound deck, and a wall of trees behind it that looked almost painted. Dense, vertical, clean, like the forest had been combed. The reviews were glowing, peaceful, life-changing. Felt like the world stopped for a while. No one mentioned anything about the trail. I arrived just before sunset on a Wednesday in October. The drive had been longer than I expected. The last 20 minutes spent creeping along a narrow lane where tree branches clawed at the roof of my car. No cell service, no GPS, just the client instructions printed out on the passenger seat like it was 2004 again. By the time I stepped out, the air had that sharp, metallic chill that sits right before a proper cold front. The cabin itself was exactly as advertised. Cedar siding, big windows, a small porch light already on. Inside, it smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. There was a tiny kitchen, a couch facing a wood stove, a loft bed with a ladder, and a guest book on the coffee table with neat loops of handwriting from strangers who all sounded spiritually healed. I dumped my duffel on the couch and did the ritual check for outlets and Wi-Fi. There was electricity, but no router, just a laminated note under the TV. There is no internet at this cabin. Our guests report deeper rest and better sleep because of it. I remember rolling my eyes. Deeper rest, sure. I put my phone in airplane mode out of habit, even though it showed no service, then stepped back outside with a beer in my hand, trying to do the thing everyone writes about in wellness blogs. Stand in nature and just be. The forest started maybe 20 feet from the back of the cabin, an abrupt wall of trunks and shadow. It was quiet, but not unnaturally so. Crickets, a distant bird, some rustling that I convinced myself was a squirrel and not something that would end up on the local news. As the last of the light slipped away, I noticed there was no obvious trail. No worn path where guests had trudged into the woods, no nature walk that the listing mentioned, just undergrowth and a tangle of roots. Good, I thought. No hikers accidentally wandering onto the deck. I went to bed around 11, feeling oddly restless from the forced stillness. No social feeds, no email, no late-night YouTube spiral, just the creak of the cabin and the hum of the small refrigerator. I read a bit, stared at the ceiling, and must have drifted off sometime close to midnight. What woke me up was not a noise exactly. It felt like the silence itself changed. 1 second the world hummed with the low background sounds of the woods, the whisper of wind, the small tick of branches on glass. The next, it was as if someone had pressed mute on everything outside. My eyes snapped open, and I lay there, heart already beating faster, trying to figure out what felt wrong. No crickets, no leaves, no nothing. The air was heavy, thick. The only sound was my own breathing, too loud in the loft. I told myself it was just country quiet, that my city brain was not used to it, but something in my gut disagreed. I climbed down the ladder and checked the clock on the stove. The green digit said 12:07. I should have gone back to bed. Instead, I walked to the sliding glass door that looked out over the back deck and the tree line. The porch light was still on, casting that small yellow circle you get from cheap fixtures. Beyond it, the forest was a black curtain. As my eyes adjusted, I saw something that made my scalp tighten. There, running straight from the edge of the deck and into the trees, was a path. It was narrow and pale, like something had parted the undergrowth and pressed the soil flat, forming a distinct line that threaded between the trunks. I had stood in that exact spot earlier at dusk. I was sure there had been nothing there. I slid the door open a few inches and leaned out. The air tasted colder, like old pennies and pine sap. The path looked almost fresh, the way a trail does, right after several people have walked it and the earth is still soft underfoot. My first thought was that the owners must have forgotten to mention it. Maybe there was a loop that guests could explore. Maybe I just had not seen it before. Still, it set my teeth on edge. I closed the door, grabbed the rental's little flashlight from the counter, and stood there arguing with myself for a full minute. You are here to get out of your head, I thought. It is a path in the woods, not a demon portal. Take a look, then come back, tell your therapist you touched grass, and feel ridiculous for freaking out over dirt. So I went. The boards of the deck creaked under my feet as I stepped out. The night was colder than it had felt through the glass, the kind of cold that bites at the tips of your ears. My breath came in faint plumes as I walked to the top of the 3 stairs that led down to the ground. From there, the path was even clearer. A narrow strip of bare earth, running straight from the bottom step toward the trees. On either side, the forest floor was a chaotic mess of dead leaves and ferns and tangled roots. The path was clean, too clean. I told myself it was probably an animal trail. Deer, maybe. Something that had worn the ground down over time, that made more sense than a path that showed up at midnight. Flashlight in hand, I stepped down and onto the trail. The soil felt damp under my shoes, but not muddy, as if it had recently been disturbed and then patted back into place. I tracked the beam ahead of me, watching the pale strip snake between trunks that seemed to loom larger the closer I came to them. The cabin light fell away behind me, swallowed quickly by the dark. Within 10 steps, the only illumination was the flashlight and a faint smear of stars through the canopy. The path continued, unwavering, narrow but confident, like it knew exactly where it wanted me to go. The deeper I walked, the more the forest changed. At first, it was subtle. A branch that I was sure had not been there a second ago brushed my shoulder. Roots I could have sworn I did not see twisted up out of the ground in front of my next step. Trees that had been spaced comfortably apart now seemed closer together, their trunks angled in odd ways, leaning over the path as if listening. I kept turning around to check that I could still see the glow of the cabin. After a while, there was nothing behind me but darkness and the narrow line of the trail receding like a throat. I told myself not to panic. Trails often look different at night. Shadows play tricks on depth. The forest is not moving. You are just a city kid with no night vision and too much anxiety. Except, occasionally, when my flashlight passed over a tree, the bark looked wrong. Ripples where there should have been ridges, bulges, like something underneath was pressing outward. Once, I could have sworn a knot in the trunk blinked. By then, my heartbeat lived in my throat. I considered turning back, but each time I did, the path behind me felt narrower, constricted, as if the forest had inhaled while I was not looking. Eventually, the ground began to slope gently downward. The air grew colder still, the smell of damp soil sharpening until it was almost metallic. I heard nothing, not even my own footsteps. That was the strangest part. I could feel my shoes connect with the earth, but the sound was muted, as though I was walking on something padded. The path opened suddenly into a small clearing. I knew we had arrived before the circle of trees really registered, because the cold hit my face in a single, flattened wave. The beam of my flashlight shook slightly as I swept it around. The clearing was almost perfectly round. At its center sat a low ring of stones, each one roughly the same size, arranged in a circle that looked too precise to be random. Inside that ring, the earth was slightly raised, a shallow mound that had been packed smooth. And at the far edge of that circle, facing me, was a tree stump. It was not jagged like a tree that had been hastily cut. The top had been sanded flat, the The bark peeled away from the sides, the edges worn to a soft curve. Someone, or something, had carved it into a seat. I stood at the edge of the clearing, every instinct screaming at me to leave it alone. My flashlight beam hovered over the stump, and that was when I saw it. Steam, a faint shimmer of it rising from the flat surface, vanishing into the cold air. The kind of thin, ghostly vapor you get when you exhale on a winter morning, or when you press your hand onto ice and then lift it away. The stump was warm, recently used. I did not want to know by what. The realization slid into me like ice water. My legs turned soft, my skin prickling with a million invisible needles. I took an involuntary step back, the beam jerking wildly across the stones. For a fraction of a second, as the light passed over the trees that ringed the clearing, I had the unmistakable impression of tall figures standing there, shoulder to shoulder, watching. Then it was just trunks again. I turned and ran. There was no dignity to it, no brave, measured retreat. I bolted back along the path, half bent over, one arm in front of my face to ward off branches, the other clenching the flashlight so hard my fingers ached. This time, the forest did not pretend to be still. The trees leaned in close, their limbs clawing at my jacket. Roots writhed underfoot. More than once, something brushed the back of my neck, a cold drag like fingers made of smoke. Behind me, in the clearing, I thought I heard the scrape of wood on earth, as if something had just stood up from the stump. Do not look back, do not look back, do not look back. Eventually the ground leveled out again, and through the darkness ahead I saw the faint yellow glow of the cabin porch. It looked impossibly far away, like a stage set, but it grew as I ran until finally I was stumbling up the deck stairs and fumbling with the sliding door. I slammed it shut behind me and locked it, as if that glass would matter against whatever might have been in those woods. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed and pale, framed by the black of the night and the thin rectangle of light spilling from the cabin. The path outside was still there. I could see the pale strip in the yard leading straight up to the deck. As I watched, heart hammering, the edges of it seemed to blur, the lines softening, then fading, then vanishing altogether as if the earth was swallowing it. Within 30 seconds, the ground looked the way it had when I arrived, random and leaf-strewn. I did not sleep the rest of the night. I sat on the couch with every light in the cabin on, listening to the forest slowly regain its sounds, the timid return of crickets, the occasional rustle of something small in the leaves. The clock moved past 1, then 2, then 3. By morning, with watery sunlight coming through the windows and the forest looking annoyingly pretty, I almost convinced myself it had been a nightmare brought on by stress and silence. Almost. When I stepped onto the deck in daylight, there was no path, no disturbed soil, no sign that anything had moved through that yard in a long time. I even walked to the edge of the trees, peered between them, trying to spot the clearing. All I saw was more forest. I should have left then, packed up, driven back to the city, told my therapist that nature and I were not compatible. Instead, I told myself exactly what people always tell themselves in the first act of a horror story. It was probably just in your head. The day passed in a weird, jittery haze. I forced myself to make coffee, to read, to jot a few lines in a notebook like I was supposed to be journaling my great spiritual retreat. Every so often, my eyes would drift to the sliding door, checking the yard, as if a path might slowly right itself there in daylight if I caught it off guard. Nothing happened. By late evening, I was exhausted enough that the idea of sleep sounded like mercy. The sky outside turned dark again, the trees slowly vanishing into silhouette. I left the porch light on, more for psychological comfort than practicality, then climbed into the loft bed and watched the din of my thoughts swirl until sleep finally pulled me under. When I snapped awake, I knew the time before I saw the clock. Silence. Not the soft quiet of night, but that same heavy, oppressive absence, like the world was holding its breath. The digital display on the stove read 12:03. For a long moment I lay there, eyes locked on the ceiling, every muscle tense. Then, slowly, I climbed down and walked to the sliding door. The porch light was on, the deck was empty, the fours beyond leaned in, waiting, and there, clear as a scar, was the path. Except this time, it did not start at the bottom of the stairs and lead away into the trees. It started at the tree line and ended at the foot of the deck stairs, pressed right up against the first weathered board like a tongue against teeth. The soil near the cabin looked freshly disturbed, darker than the surrounding ground. As I watched, A small clod crumbled and fell from the edge of the top step, as if something very heavy had just walked up them. My breath fogged the glass. I did not open the door. I did not grab the flashlight. Every nerve in my body screamed that the rules had changed, that going out there was no longer a curious mistake, it was an invitation. Instead, I took 3 steps backward, then 4, until the back of my knees hit the couch. I sat down slowly, never taking my eyes off the door. The path did not fade this time. It just sat there, a dark vein pressed into the earth. Something moved at the edge of the trees. Not in the vague, maybe it is the windway that you can write off in the daylight. A figure stepped just far enough forward that it caught the edge of the porch light, then stopped. I could not see its face, only the shape, taller than any person I knew, too thin, limbs slightly wrong, as if the forest had tried to build a human out of branches for memory and given up halfway. It stood there, utterly still, watching the cabin, watching me. The glass felt painfully thin. I do not know how long we stayed like that. Time stretched until it might have been minutes or hours. My legs went numb, my eyes watered. At some point, the figure tilted its head, a bird-like, jerky motion, as if listening to something I could not hear. Then it turned and stepped backward into the forest, swallowed by the dark in a single stride. The silence broke like a dropped plate. Night sounds rushed back, crickets shrilling, leaves whispering, as if someone had hit play. Outside, the path began to fade, the dark line softening, then dissolving, until the yard looked utterly ordinary again. I left at dawn without even making coffee, tossing my things into the car with shaking hands. Gravel spit from under my tires as I tore down the narrow lane, not trusting myself to look in the rearview mirror. By the time I reached a stretch of highway with actual cell reception, my phone exploded with missed notifications from the world I thought I wanted a break from. Work emails, group chats, a voicemail from my therapist reminding me to lean into the stillness. I did not call the cabin owners. I did not leave a review. A week later, in a moment of morbid curiosity, I pulled up the listing again. It was still there, still boasting about its lack of Wi-Fi and spiritual quiet. New reviews had been added since my stay. Most peaceful sleeps I have had in years. Woke up at midnight to absolute silence. It felt like the universe was pausing just for me. Had the strangest urge to go for a walk after dark. So glad I did. I have never felt so connected to nature. I stared at that last one for a long time. There was no mention of a path, no mention of a clearing, or a circle of stones, or a carved stump still warm from something invisible sitting there. Sometimes at night, when the city traffic dips low enough that my apartment feels too quiet, I think about that forest, about the way the trees seem to press closer with each step, repositioning themselves behind my back. I wonder if the path is there every night, waiting, writing itself from the cabin door to the clearing, leading whoever is restless or lonely or curious out into the dark so something can sit and watch them for a while from a perfect wooden seat. My therapist has been encouraging me to go on another solo trip. Somewhere remote, she says. Somewhere quiet. I tell her I am not ready. What I do not tell her is that sometimes, very faintly, I swear I can smell pine sap and cold earth in my apartment hallway, as if a forest trail is trying to find me, even here. I check the floorboards by my front door more often than I want to admit, making sure the wood is smooth and undisturbed every night just after midnight. Story 2. I worked as a park ranger until the forest started talking back. I do not tell people I used to be a park ranger. Not anymore. If it comes up, I usually shrug and say, I worked in conservation or outdoorsy stuff, so the conversation dies before it hits the real story. People romanticize rangers. They think it is all scenic views and saving baby deer and handing out maps to lost tourists. They don't think about the night shifts. They don't think about the silence. And they definitely don't think about the voices. This happened at Blackbriar State Forest. If you look it up, you'll find the usual marketing fluff about pristine trails and protected wildlife and how the forest is one of the quietest natural spaces in the state. Quiet, yes, but not in the way people think. I had worked there for 8 years when it started, long enough that the forest felt like muscle memory. I could navigate half the trails blindfolded. I knew the locations of every trail marker, every lean-to shelter, every odd boulder with graffiti chiseled into the side, long enough that I could tell what animal was moving through the undergrowth just from the cadence of footsteps, long enough to know when something sounded wrong. My shift that night began at 11 p.m. Nothing unusual. Lots of older rangers hate the night shift, but I always preferred it. The forest had a different personality at night. Quieter, slower, more ancient. The tourists, hikers, campers, influencers, and wannabe nature photographers were all tucked away. The trails belonged to the trees again. Around 1 in the morning, I parked the truck at the trailhead for Ridgeway Loop, a long path that cut into the densest part of the woods. My job was simple. Walk the first 2 miles in, check the fire pits near Pine Hollow, make sure no teenagers were out there drinking. The cold that night was heavy, thick, the kind of chill that makes your breathing sound too loud in your own ears. My flashlight beam sliced the dark in a thin white line, illuminating only what I needed and nothing more. The trees swallowed the rest. Normal night, normal silence, until it wasn't. At exactly 2:13 a.m. every year. Same night, same time. I didn't know that yet, of course. All I knew was that one moment, the forest was alive, humming with quiet little noises, and the next moment, all of it stopped. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't subtle. It was like someone flipped a switch. Crickets, gone. Wind, gone. Branches moving, gone. Even the rustle of my own footsteps felt muffled, like the air had thickened into syrup. It's hard to explain what absolute silence feels like unless you've been swallowed by it. It presses on you. It pushes into your ears, behind your eyes. It makes you aware of your heartbeat in a way that feels wrong. I stopped walking, slowly turned off the flashlight. Not sure why. Instinct, maybe. The dark didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. For a long moment, I stood absolutely still, breath fogging faintly in front of me, waiting for something to move, waiting for the silence to break. It didn't. Not for maybe 20 seconds. And then it happened. A whisper. Soft. Thin. Coming from the tree line, maybe 20 feet to my right. Hello. My throat tightened. It was a child's voice. A boy, maybe 8 or 9. Just one word, carried through the air like a leaf on a still pond. I flicked on my flashlight so fast, the switch scraped my thumb. Nothing. No shape. No movement. Just the beam stretching across trunks and undergrowth. I stood frozen, trying to convince myself that I'd misheard it, that maybe my own breathing had echoed strangely. But the forest remained dead silent around me. Not just quiet. Dead. After maybe 5 more seconds, I heard it again, this time from my left. Hello. Same pitch, same tone, same voice. I started backing up along the trail, one slow step at a time, my flashlight shaking just a little. My radio was clipped to my jacket, but something in me knew calling it in was pointless. What would I even say? Dispatch. The forest is saying hi. I increased my pace, breathing getting quicker, heart thudding like it was trying to crack my ribs open. And then another whisper drifted through the trees. Not a child this time. A woman. Help me. The words slid out of the darkness so soft they almost sounded like breath itself. I spun the flashlight in the direction of the voice, expecting to see a barefoot woman in distress, maybe a lost hiker, but the beam revealed the same thing as before. Trees. Untouched undergrowth. Nothing disturbed. Help me. Closer this time. Too close. I stumbled backward and nearly tripped over a root. Panic was creeping up my spine in hot little bursts. I wasn't new to weird things in the woods. I'd seen drunk campers, aggressive raccoons, coyotes acting strange during mating season. I'd found evidence of squatters in the abandoned fire towers. All of that has rules. This did not. This felt intelligent, observing, playing. Who's there? I called out, instantly regretting it. My voice sounded like it didn't belong to me. Thin, small. The answer came from directly behind me. Come deeper. I swung around violently, my boots scraping the dirt. The voice was mine, my exact voice, perfectly matched, down to cadence and breath. But I hadn't spoken. Something in the forest had learned how. I don't remember running. I only remember the sound of air rushing in my ears and the dull roar of blood as I sprinted back toward the trailhead, flashlight bouncing wildly across the ground. The whispers followed. Children, adults, some crying, some laughing, some chanting fragments of sentences that sounded like pieces of overheard conversations. And mine, most of all mine, calling my name, over and over. The moment I burst out of the woods and into the gravel lot, the forest sound returned all at once. A gust of wind pushed through the branches. Crickets resumed their thin metallic chirping. An owl called somewhere in the distance. The radio on my shoulder crackled like nothing had happened at all. I slammed into my truck, locked the doors, and sat in the dark cab with the engine running while my hands shook uncontrollably. Eventually, I drove back to the station. I didn't write a report. I didn't mention it to anyone. Who would believe it? I told myself I was tired, that night shifts warp your perception, that maybe it was auditory hallucination brought on by lack of sleep and too many hours alone in the dark. Except it happened again the next year. Same date, same time, 2:13 a.m. The forest went silent like it had been smothered under a glass dome, and then the voices began again, only this time they did not start with children. They went straight to mimicking my supervisor, then the forest historian who gave tours in summer, then one of the newer rangers who had only worked there 3 months, and then me, dozens of versions, all whispering the same phrase in unison. Come deeper. I didn't run that time. I walked backward out of the forest, steady, slow. My flashlight pointed at the ground. The moment I cleared the tree line, the forest sounds returned and the voices were gone. I quit the next morning. No official reason. Just handed in my uniform and badge and said I needed a career change. But the forest wasn't finished with me. 3 years later, I got a text from one of the rangers I used to work with. No message in the chat bubble, just a file, a video clip. One from a new trail camera they had installed deep inside Ridgeway Loop. I tapped it open, expecting footage of a deer or maybe a bear, but the video was almost entirely black, barely illuminated by the camera's faint infrared glow. The trees were ghostly white skeletons in the background. There was no movement, no animals, just stillness. The audio was warped, static filling 90% of it, crackling like a radio caught between frequencies, but beneath the distortion, faint, just barely audible, a voice, my voice, calling my name from somewhere deep in the dark. Not the way I speak normally, not like I am now, but like I sounded when I had been running for my life. Breathless, panicked, voice strained, and shaking. I watched the clip 7 times. The voice was always there. At the end of the video, right before the clip cut to black, another voice whispered 2 words. Not mine, not any human one, something lower, hollow, like air moving through a throat that wasn't built for speech. Found you. My phone slipped out of my hand. I didn't pick it up for a long time. I blocked the number, deleted the video, told myself it was a prank, a sick joke, someone using an AI vocal filter. But every time I wake up in the middle of the night now, when the world is quiet and still and the wind outside my window settles for just a moment, I swear I can hear the forest again. Not physically, not literally, but in the way that something remembers you, like an unfinished sentence waiting for you to come back, like a voice just behind your ear whispering the same 2 words in perfect mimicry of your own. Come deeper. And I know, with the kind of dread that lives somewhere deeper than bone, that if I ever step foot in Blackbriar again, the forest will not ask a 3rd time. Story 3. We saw a campfire deep in the woods, but no one was sitting around it. I have been camping since I was a kid. I have been in storms, slept through bear encounters, and once woke up to find a raccoon literally inside my tent, rifling through my snack bag like it was shopping. I thought I had seen everything the woods could throw at me. I was wrong. This happened last October, during a weekend camping trip with 3 of my closest friends, Evan, Tyler, and Marissa. We all grew up together, drifted apart in college, and now try to do one nostalgia trip every year so we don't lose the thread of who we used to be. We picked a state forest about 2 hours away from the city, a place with old-growth pines so tall they look like they're holding up the sky. We parked, hiked about a mile in, and set up camp in a clearing near a river bend. It was perfect. Quiet but not too isolated. Beautiful but not commercialized. The first night went exactly as planned. We built a fire, cooked way too many hot dogs, gossiped about people we used to know, and drank cheap beer until the flames died to embers. Then we crawled into our tents and passed out under a sky thick with stars. The second night is when it happened. We had been hiking all day and got back to the campsite around dusk. Evan started prepping the fire while I collected kindling from the tree line. The forest was colder than the previous night, and a thin mist was starting to gather in the low areas, the kind that sits in slow, moving sheets, drifting between trunks. I remember thinking it looked like something alive. We finished dinner just after dark and were sitting around our fire, talking about work stress and relationships and how much we hated getting older. Typical late 20s existential rambling. At some point, Marissa fell quiet mid-sentence and lowered her beer. "Do you guys see that?" Her voice was so soft that at first I thought she was joking, but her face wasn't in her usual half smirk. She looked pale, squinting into the trees behind me. I turned. Tyler did too. Evan didn't move, just muttered, "Nope, don't do that horror movie whisper. Don't like that." About 50 yards away, deep between the trees, was another fire. Just a glow at first, but as we all leaned forward, it became unmistakable. Orange light flickering between the trunks, dancing against the fog, too steady to be sunlight, too warm to be a flashlight, a campfire. "Did anyone set up near us?" Tyler asked. "No," I said. "We passed no one all day, and there's no other sites nearby. The next designated area is a half-mile downriver." "There's no trail there," Evan added. "That's just straight-up forest." We sat in silence for a moment listening, but that was the unsettling part. There was no sound, not people talking, not footsteps, not the occasional metallic clink of someone messing with gear, no cough, no laughter, no shifting, just a fire burning alone, with nobody around it. "Could be a hunter," Marissa said. "Hunters don't camp like that," Evan replied. "They use lanterns or headlamps. They don't just sit in the forest with a single fire burning in a random spot." Regardless, none of us felt right about it, but we couldn't stop looking at it. It felt like when you see something strange at night on the side of the road, you know it's nothing good, you know you shouldn't investigate, but you can't pull your eyes away. And after a few minutes, Evan said the stupidest, most predictable thing a human can say when confronted by the unknown. "Let's go check it out." I expected Marissa to shut him down immediately, but she was staring at that glow with a strange expression. It wasn't fear. It wasn't curiosity. It was something more complicated, uneasy, compelled, like she was trying to convince herself that it was harmless. In the end, it was 2 votes yes, 1 vote maybe, 1 vote strongly no. I was the strongly no, but Evan was already grabbing his flashlight, and Tyler wasn't about to let him wander off alone. And if they went, Marissa went. And if the 3 of them went, there was no way in hell I was staying behind alone, so we went. Single file, quiet. The closer we got, the weirder it felt. Usually approaching someone else's camp, you hear them before you see them. People shuffling gear, fiddling with a stove, cracking open a drink, something. But the woods were completely still, completely quiet. Our footsteps sounded unnaturally sharp. The light grew brighter through the trees until finally we stepped into a small clearing, and there it was. A perfect campfire. A ring of stones arranged neatly around a pile of burning logs. Flames rising, flickering, brightening the mist in warm pulses. Except there were no logs, not real ones. They were shaped like logs, yes, but the texture was all wrong. Too smooth, like someone had sculpted them from wax. And the flames were not flames. They were moving, but not randomly like fire. They looped, a perfect repeating pattern of flicker, rise, dip, flicker, rise, dip. Identical. Frame for frame identical. Tyler whispered, "It looks like a GIF." And he was right. It looked digital, artificial, as if reality was projecting a fire through bad software. We circled slowly. There were no footprints, no backpacks, no chairs, no tent, not even disturbed leaves leading into the clearing. "Okay," Evan said quietly. "I don't like this." "No one touch anything," I said. "Who the hell would touch it?" Tyler whispered. "Apparently, Evan," because as I turned to look at him, he reached out a hand toward the flame. "Evan, don't." His fingers brushed the fire, and the entire thing collapsed. Not like a real fire dying, not like embers going out. The image folded inward, warped, crumpled like paper being balled in a fist. The flames shrank into a shape that made no physical sense, a kind of glitchy square of flickering orange light that pulsed violently, then blinked out. The clearing went instantly dark. All at once, the silence became suffocating. That was when we heard the footsteps, very soft, very slow, circling us. Not animals, not deer, These were deliberate, bipedal, measured. We huddled together, shining our flashlights in frantic arcs, but the beams caught nothing except trees and fog. The footsteps kept circling, sometimes close enough that I could swear I felt movement in the air, sometimes far enough that they blended with the darkness. Then they stopped. Silence, again. Then, behind us, a sound that still makes my stomach twist when I think about it. A long, slow exhale. Not human, not animal, something in between. Like something trying to imitate breathing without understanding how lungs worked. We ran. No plan, no coordination, just pure fear. Branches whipped our arms and faces. The mist curled around our legs like hands. Several times I slipped on wet leaves, nearly falling. I heard someone behind me yell, but I didn't look back. We didn't stop until we burst into our own campsite, gasping, wild-eyed, flashlights darting across the trees like searchlights. Nothing followed us. Not that we could see or hear. We sat around our own fire in stunned silence until it burned itself low. None of us went to our tents. We stayed up, clutching our gear, barely speaking, until the sky turned gray with morning. When the sun was fully up, we forced ourselves to go back to the clearing. We told ourselves it might look normal in daylight, that we'd laugh at how stupid we were. But when we reached the spot, the clearing was empty. Not just empty, incorrect. The ground was untouched. No circle of stones, no scorched dirt, no sign anything had ever been there, except something had changed. Around the perimeter of the clearing, evenly spaced like marks on a clock face, were 5 rings of blackened earth. 5 perfect circles, each the size of a campfire pit, each one identical, each one filled with ash. But none of us had gone into the clearing the night before, and the 5th circle was directly behind where we had stood. Evan whispered, "They're like footprints." Marissa said, "No, they're positions." Positions for what? She didn't say. We packed up our site in 20 minutes, didn't eat breakfast, didn't talk. As we hiked back to the cars, every snap twig sounded like a footstep behind us. Every patch of mist looked like something crouching low. When we reached the parking lot, I turned on my phone. Notifications flooded in. Normal, comforting, mundane. For a moment, I thought maybe we had imagined all of it. Group hysteria or something. Then I saw the home screen. My wallpaper had changed. It was a photo, a dark clearing, 5 rings of ash. And in the center, barely visible between the trees, a faint shape standing at the tree line, watching. The photo was time-stamped at 2:16 a.m., the exact minute the fire vanished, the exact minute the footsteps began, and the exact minute my phone had been turned off. I deleted the picture, but it didn't matter. Sometimes when I close my eyes now, I still see that moment before the fire collapsed. That feeling that something else was watching it too, waiting for us to get close so it could circle us and choose where to stand next. We haven't gone camping since. Evan insists it was a hallucination. Tyler says it was an elaborate prank. Marissa refuses to talk about it at all. But every now and then, when I step outside at night, I swear I catch a faint orange flicker in the corner of my vision, perfectly looping, perfectly still, waiting for me to look long enough to see that it's not a fire at all, just an invitation. Story 4. The Missing Hiker Who Followed Us Home. I used to love backpacking. Past tense. It was my escape from everything. From work, from the noise of the city, from the constant static of life pushing in from all sides. Whenever I felt burnt out or worn down, I'd text my friend Jonah, and within a day we'd be throwing our packs into the trunk of his Subaru, heading for whichever trail had the least Instagram tags and the most tree cover. This trip was supposed to be the last one before winter. Mid-October, cool air, leaves starting to change color. The kind of hike where you don't sweat to death, but you can still sleep in a tent without freezing your face off. The missing hiker wasn't part of the plan. We started early that morning, reaching the trailhead at around 7 a.m. The sky was pale and foggy, the kind of morning that feels soft around the edges. We checked the map, tightened our straps, and headed into the forest. The trail was perfect, quiet, damp in that pleasant, earthy way. Birds overhead, the occasional distant snap that was probably a deer or maybe just the woods speaking its language. For most of the hike, we talked about stupid stuff. Favorite horror movies, which snacks were objectively the best trail food, whether we were slowly becoming our parents, just normal conversation carried by the rhythm of footsteps on dirt. It was about an hour before sunset when we found the man. He stepped out from behind a cluster of deadfall like he had been standing there the whole time, waiting for us to notice him. His clothes were torn. His skin was pale under the grime. His hair was matted to his forehead as if he'd been sweating and freezing in cycles. At first, I thought he was injured, or maybe dehydrated. But it wasn't any of that. It was his eyes, wide, unfocused, like he had seen something he couldn't process. He walked straight toward us with slow, uneven steps. "Hey," Jonah said carefully, lifting his hands like you would with a scared animal. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" The man swallowed. It was an audible sound, thick and dry. "I've been lost," he whispered. 3 days. His voice had a tremor in it that didn't sound like fear. It sounded like exhaustion, or shock, or maybe both. We brought him to a log and helped him sit down. Jonah gave him water and a protein bar. He took the water with shaking hands, gulping it so fast some spilled down his shirt, but he didn't touch the food. He just stared at it. I tried to get more information. "What's your name? Do you know where you came from? Were you camping with anyone?" He didn't answer any of that. Instead, he looked up at us with this strange, desperate expression and whispered, Did you hear it call your names too?" A chill ran up my spine so fast it made my teeth ache. Jonah shot me a look. I shook my head. Neither of us knew what the hell he was talking about. "Who called your name?" I asked. He just stared into the trees behind us. His eyes didn't blink. His voice sank into a whisper so thin it barely existed. "You don't hear it yet, but you will." We both stood there for a moment, unsure what to say or do. The forest was quiet around us, unnaturally so for that time of day. No wind, no birds, as if the whole place was waiting. Jonah cleared his throat. "Look, we're heading back to the trailhead. Come with us. We'll call search and rescue. They can bring you in safely." For a moment, the man didn't move. Then he stood, slowly, without looking at us. We began walking. The missing hiker followed a few feet behind us, his steps soft and uneven. Every now and then, he would twitch like he was about to turn back, but then he'd force himself forward again. The entire hike back, none of us spoke. Not him, not us. Every sound felt amplified. Every shadow looked like it shifted slightly when you weren't staring directly at it. We were maybe 15 minutes from the parking lot when Jonah murmured, "Hold up. Where'd he go?" I spun around. The hiker was gone. Not lagging behind, not stepping off the path. Just gone. The forest was too quiet, like it had swallowed him whole. We called his name. We searched up and down the trail. We walked circles around the last spot we saw him. Nothing. No footprints. No broken branches. No movement. It was like he had stepped backward into the dark between the trees and dissolved. Eventually, the sky dimmed too much to keep looking. We hurried the last stretch back to the parking area and called the local ranger station. They said they'd send a search team out in the morning. We gave descriptions. We gave details. We gave everything we could. Then we drove home in uneasy silence. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because of fear, exactly. Something else. A feeling I couldn't shake. Like I had forgotten to do something important. The knocking started the next afternoon. 3 sharp raps. Not frantic, not aggressive, just insistent. I expected it to be a package delivery, or Jonah stopping by to talk about the hike again. It wasn't. It was him, the missing hiker. Standing in my apartment hallway. He was wearing the same torn clothes, the same dirt caked on his arms, the same blank, exhausted stare. But something was different now. His face was angled slightly past me, staring into my apartment instead of at me. I froze. My throat closed. He whispered the exact same words he had said in the woods, the exact same shaking tone. "Did you hear it call your names too?" My heart hammered so fast I could barely breathe. "How did you get here?" I choked out. "The forest is hours away. They were supposed to bring you into the station. What happened to you? Who are you?" He didn't answer any of that. He just kept staring past me. Eyes locked on something behind me. Something inside my home. I turned reflexively. Nothing. Just my dim living room. Shadows stretching long over the floor. But when I looked back at the hiker, he wasn't looking at the room anymore. He was looking at me, directly, and, for the first time, he smiled. It was small, tight, wrong, like someone stretching skin over a shape it wasn't meant to fit. Then he whispered, very softly, almost lovingly, "You should not have answered it." Before I could move, he stepped backward, not walking, not turning, stepped backward, like gravity had reversed just for him. His body faded into the dim hallway, swallowed by a shadow that had no source. I lunged toward the doorway, flipping the hall light switch on with shaking hands. Nothing there. No footprints. No marks. No man. Just the faint smell of wet earth, like the forest had exhaled into my building. Jonah called me that evening. His voice was shaky. "Someone knocked on my door," he said. "A man, in torn clothes, asking if I heard something calling my name." My blood went cold. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I didn't," Jonah whispered. I froze, and then he was suddenly not there, just gone. But before he left, he looked behind me, into my place, like something else was standing there. We didn't talk long. Neither of us wanted to describe what we were feeling, the sense that we had brought something back with us, or something had followed. I barely slept that night. Every sound outside my window made me jolt. Every shift of shadow felt like movement. At one point, around 3 a.m., I swore I heard someone whispering my name from the corner of my bedroom. Not loud, not aggressive, just a thin, soft voice, like a thread pulled tight. I turned on every light in the place. Didn't help. I've tried telling myself it was sleep deprivation, stress, an overactive imagination fueled by too much horror media. But there's one detail I can't shake. When the missing hiker first appeared on the trail, he asked us if we heard it calling our names too. A direct question. He never told us who or what it was, never explained what had called him, never described what he had heard in the forest during those 3 days he was lost. But when he appeared at my apartment, when he stared behind me with that hollow intensity, when he smiled, that inhuman smile, he didn't look confused anymore. He didn't look lost. He looked grateful, like he had delivered something, or someone, or some message. Like we had answered a call we weren't supposed to hear. I moved last month. Different building, different neighborhood, different everything. But some nights, when it gets quiet enough, too quiet, I hear a faint knock somewhere in the hallway. 3 sharp raps, measured, patient, then silence, followed by a whisper so soft I can't tell if it's coming from outside the door or from inside the walls of my own home. "Did you hear it call your name?" I don't open the door. Not ever. Because the forest is far away. Too far for any man to walk overnight. Too far for someone to find my building without an address. And definitely too far for something to follow me home. Yet somehow, I know it's there, waiting for me to open the door, or answer back. I haven't. I won't. Because I think the moment I do, whatever is whispering my name will finally come inside. Story 5. Something in the trees learned my voice. I always used to hike alone at night. People told me not to, of course. They'd say things like, "What if you run into a bear?" Or, "Aren't you worried about getting lost?" Or, "Do you want to be the guy they make a documentary about?" But I liked the solitude. No crowds, no chatter. Just the crunch of dirt under my boots and the cold press of the night air against my face. It felt honest in a way that the rest of life didn't. This happened last November, a week after my birthday. I remember because I had promised myself that I'd get back in shape, start hiking again, push myself to be outdoors more instead of sitting at my desk stewing in deadlines. So I drove out to Pine Lantern Ridge, parked at the empty trailhead, and headed in with nothing but a flashlight, a thermos, and the stubborn belief that nature therapy might still fix me. For the first 30 minutes, everything was normal. The woods were crisp, cold enough that my breath puffed out in little white bursts. The moon was a thin slice above the tree line, barely enough to see by, but the flashlight filled the gaps. It was quiet, but not unnaturally so. I heard the usual night forest symphony, distant insects, the occasional flutter of something small in the brush, branches swaying overhead, then something else. I had just passed the half-mile marker when I heard it, a voice, soft, far away. It said my name. Not loud, not urgent, just spoken. Like someone calling out to me from deeper in the trail. I froze, swung the flashlight around. Nothing but trees and blackness. My first thought was that someone from the trailhead had followed me, Maybe another hiker arrived after I started and was trying to catch up. So I called out, "Hello? Someone there?" Silence. Then the voice again, fainter this time, almost curious. It said my name again. I swallowed hard. It didn't sound exactly like me, but close enough that something in my gut twisted. It felt wrong, too familiar, like hearing a recording of yourself you don't remember making. "Okay," I muttered under my breath. "Nope, don't like that." I started walking back toward the car. Slower than I should have, if I'm being honest. Something about running in the dark felt worse than turning my back. I had gone maybe 20 steps when the voice called out again. This time it sounded closer, too close. It came from the right side of the trail, maybe 15 feet in. But when I shined my flashlight into the trees, the beam only revealed dense undergrowth and thick trunks rising into shadow. No person, no movement, nothing. Who's out there? I called, with a voice that was embarrassingly shaky. The answering voice didn't repeat my name this time. It said something else. "Come look." My blood ran cold. Because the tone, the cadence, the exact way the word stretched, it was my voice, perfectly replicated. I backed up so fast I nearly tripped. My flashlight trembled in my hand. This wasn't an echo. This wasn't someone messing with me. It was too precise, too deliberate, too intentional. And something inside me, some old ancient instinct buried beneath all modern logic, whispered the truth before my mind was willing to accept it. It wasn't mimicking someone, it was mimicking me. I turned and fast walked to the trailhead, not running, not yet. But every few steps, I would hear it again. My own voice calling my name. First far, then nearer, then from behind me, then from the left, then the right, then from ahead. Every direction, like the trees themselves, were learning how to shape my sound. Halfway back, I finally broke into a run. Panic had burned through whatever rational explanation I was trying to cling to. The forest around me felt different now, sharper, listening, as if each trunk and branch and patch of darkness was leaning in a little too close, waiting for me to stumble. My breath grew loud, heavy, echoing strangely in the stillness, and that was when it clicked. The forest wasn't silent. It was repeating me. Every breath I exhaled came back a half second later from somewhere else. Every crunch of my boots against the ground was doubled by a faint, delayed imitation. It wasn't an echo. It was learning, copying, practicing. I burst out of the trail and into the empty parking lot. My car sat under the lone street lamp like a lifeboat. I almost sobbed with relief seeing it. But the moment I reached for the door handle, a voice spoke from behind me. My voice, "Don't stop." It was so close that I felt the breath of it against the back of my neck. I whipped around so fast I dropped the flashlight. It clattered to the pavement and spun wildly, its beam sweeping in blurry arcs across the gravel and into the trees. Nothing. No person. No movement. Just the forest, dark and impossibly still. My heart hammered so violently I thought I might pass out. I fumbled into the car, slammed the door, locked it, and jammed the key into the ignition. For a moment, everything inside the vehicle was silent. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel. Then it spoke again, my own voice, from the back seat. "Found you." I don't remember driving home. Not really. I remember the blur of headlights. I remember the ache in my chest from breathing too hard. I remember checking my rearview mirror so many times, my vision blurred. But the weirdest part? The forest didn't follow. Not out loud, anyway. The first night home, nothing happened. The second night, nothing. The third, I slept with all the lights on, waiting for the voice to return, but it didn't. For a while, I convinced myself it was stress, a hallucination, some bizarre auditory trick of the woods. And then one evening, about a week later, my phone rang. No caller ID, no number, just unknown. When I answered, I didn't hear static, or breathing, or a person. I heard myself, whispering, "Come back." I threw the phone across the room. It rang again and again, 4 more times that night, each from unknown. Each time it was me speaking on the other end, not just saying random things, saying things I had said in the forest. My own words played back at me with perfect clarity, perfect timing, perfect mimicry. The next day, I changed my number, bought a different phone, different carrier, different everything. The calls stopped, but the forest wasn't finished. About a month later, I was walking home from work just after sunset when I heard a familiar voice in the distance. My voice, calling my name from across the street. Mute, soft, almost swallowed by the sound of passing cars. I froze so suddenly people behind me had to walk around. My skin crawled, my stomach dropped, and I couldn't force myself to breathe for several seconds. When I finally turned toward the sound, nothing was there. Just rooftops, houses, an empty yard. The next night, I heard it again. Not outside this time. Inside my apartment, from the hallway. Then, right behind my bedroom door. Then, faintly, from under the bed. Always my voice. Always whispering. Always getting closer. I moved apartments within a week. Still wasn't enough. Something had found me. Something that lived in the forest but didn't need to stay there. Something that learned the sound of me like a key. And once it learned it, it didn't forget. People ask why I don't hike anymore. Why I stopped going into parks, trails, anywhere with trees dense enough to swallow sound. I don't know how to explain it without sounding insane. Because the truth is simple, and impossible, and terrifying. Something in that forest learned my voice. It didn't stop at mimicry. It didn't stop at repeating. It understood. And now, sometimes, late at night, when the street outside grows quiet and the shadows in my apartment stretch a little too far, I hear a whisper drifting through the dark. Soft, familiar, perfectly matched. Come look. I don't answer. I don't move. I don't breathe until it stops. Because I know what will happen if I ever follow that voice again. It won't be me walking out of the forest next time. It'll be whatever's been practicing me piece by piece until it gets the rest right. You've reached the end of tonight's walk through the places the map pretends don't exist, the quiet parts of the forest where the trees lean in just a little too close and the shadows know your name. If any moment lingered in your mind, if a detail felt too real, if you found yourself glancing at the window or listening for something moving beyond the walls, don't let the stories end here. Subscribe to Step Deeper into the Woods with me. More whispers in the dark, more trails that appear where they shouldn't, more encounters with the things that follow you home. Tell me in the comments which story caught in your thoughts and which one felt uncomfortably familiar. Like the video so these stories reach others who've heard their names carried on the wind when they were certain they were alone. And if you've ever felt watched in the woods, if you've heard footsteps that weren't yours, if something called to you from the tree line long after the campsite fell silent, you can share your story. Send it to the email in the channel bio, and it may become part of a future Entity Shadows exploration. Thank you for listening, for walking into the dark with me, for trusting the silence long enough to hear what waits inside it. And until next time, stay on the path, don't look back, and remember, the forest is always listening. And remember, the dark awaits. If you want more Entity Shadows stories, you can find full-length narrations and exclusive episodes on the Entity Shadows Horror Podcast, available on Spotify. Just search for the Entity Shadows Horror Podcast and step deeper into the dark.